Alpha 318 has made Orison great again. Well, not really, because it was never great to begin with. In fact, it was so bad that I made a video 10 months ago talking about why you should avoid Orison. But with the TDD changes, which were before 318, quantum altitude changes, and security post-Korea, Orison has become a more attractive destination for players. But this one addition has made it the premier place to go in Star Citizen, the Orison missions. But before you can do them, you have to complete the security work assessment in your contract manager in Orison. The assessment consists of clearing a bunker of hostiles. Once you've completed it, a repel raid mission will pop up. The payout from these missions is not bad, and as always, I highly recommend accepting the call to arms contract when doing security missions to get bonus cash for every criminal you kill. But I believe these missions are better than bunkers, and I'll explain why. And I'll show you the best way to do them. Now before you start the mission, there's a couple things you need to do. First, make sure you set your hospital location to Orison General or Grimhex so that when you die, you can quickly come back. Next, get gear. The Kelter store in Stratus has some basic gear that you can buy, but if you want better gear, Port Olisar or Grimhex has what you need. Now one way to do this is via shuttles. Head to the Crusader showroom, take the elevator to the roof, and there will be a shuttle that you can take to go to your mission. The mission location will vary, but they generally take place on one of these 4 platforms. Now if you play Siege of Orison and you know how to navigate these platforms, then here's a timestamp so you can skip all of that. Now each platform has a certain set of buildings, and these maps will help you navigate these platforms to get to your target building. For example, my contract here says that the Ninetales are in HMRH, so looking at the Heartmoor map, I can see they have to go here, and I can plan my route that way. And you'll have to take an additional shuttle. Unlike the Solanki shuttle, these shuttles work like elevators. You have to call it for them to come, and then manually press the destination. Now that's one way of doing it, also known as the loser way, because it's slow, inefficient, and boring. Here's the best way to do these missions. Once you've done the security assessment and accepted the Orison mission, which is the Repel Raid mission, fly back to Orison. Instead of landing your ship at Orison, fly it straight to the target building. Unlike Siege of Orison, you don't have to worry about AA turrets targeting you, so you can fly in unmolested and start blasting all the Ninetales on the rooftops. And there's nothing they can do about it. All they can do is scratch the paint off your ship. Although if you want to loot bodies, make sure your ship doesn't get too close, otherwise the bodies will blow away. Any leftovers you can't kill, you'll have to land your ship and kill them the old-fashioned way. Pro tip: hold G to enable gimbal aiming. It's much easier to aim than trying to use your ship to aim. What makes this strategy better than using shuttles is that you can loot as much as you want depending on the ship you're using. I found the best way to loot is to hover your ship over the roof and use your multi-tool to pick up all the bodies and put them in your ship. Once you're done looting the bodies, you can toss them out of your ship. I like to drop them into the infinite abyss that is Crusader. I wonder what happens to a corpse when it falls into a gas giant. We may never know. Red boxes have food and drinks. Gray boxes have weapons, weapon mods, ammo, and healing items. Sometimes you'll find some cool weapons in the gray boxes. But I recommend you start looting before you kill the last guy, because once you killed the last hostile, you have 15 minutes before you're deemed trespassing. Once you're done and you've killed the last guy, it's time to leave. Now the thing about this mission is it takes about 10 minutes to go from Port Olisar to the Orison platforms, and it takes less than 10 minutes to kill all the Ninetales. So you're spending more than half the time commuting. So how is this better than bunkers? Well, here's the thing. What if you never left? Wait, but you're supposed to leave. The big red letters say so. But what if you did? That's right. Instead of leaving, land your ship, log out of your ship's bed, and when you log back in, you'll still be on the Orison platforms. You'll be trespassing, but the AA turrets usually won't target you unless you start piloting. And you can do the mission again without the lengthy travel. But this is important. For this to work, you have to log into a different server than the one you did the mission in. Otherwise, the mission won't show up and you'll be stuck on the platforms. Sort of. You can still get out by taking the shuttles or logging out normally. Where you log out matters. I do not recommend bed logging on the rooftop of buildings, because spawning in is kind of glitchy. One time I did it, I ended up spawning inside of a building, and I couldn't get out. And even though I say it doesn't usually happen, it helps to bed log in an area where you won't be shot by AA turrets, because there's always a possibility that they'll start shooting your ship when you're still in bed or not piloting it. And you won't get a crime stat unless you get destroyed by AA turrets. Now if you have a ship with a medical bed, like the Cutlass Red or the Kerak, you have the added benefit of spawning in your ship if anything goes wrong and you die. Now, as with a lot of things in Star Citizen, bed logging is kind of risky, and if you don't want to do it, that's understandable. But it does make Orison missions more worthwhile, especially because it also levels up your security rank. What you can do is, if you're going to be logged up for a long period of time, like going to sleep for example, then just exit to menu. And if you want to be considerate and don't want ships to be cluttering around the platforms, you can fly your ship slightly away from the platforms, turn off the engine, and exit to menu. Your ship will fall into the infinite abyss of Crusader. But if you want to keep or sell your loot in your ship, then fly to Port Olisar and log out there. Now up to this point, I only described the Repel Raid and Orison mission, which is what you'll see in your first reputation level. There are more lucrative missions that you'll unlock with higher reputation levels. In Security Rep 2, you'll get Repel multiple raids in Orison, which is pretty self-explanatory. At Security Level 3, you'll get bounty missions which work similar to Repel raid missions, except once you kill all the Ninetales, the boss will show up and you'll have to kill him. Now the boss is pretty difficult, so you have to bring some heavy gear and weapons to kill him. Luckily, there's plenty of that lying around. 1 to 3 goons will show up with the boss. You don't have to kill them, but it helps. Or, you can just blast them all with your ship. That works too. Now I've only reached up to level 3 security rep so far, but if you want to see what the Orison missions are like at levels 4 and 5, then I highly recommend you subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss that video. Based on my experience, it takes less than 10 minutes to clear a building. So if you factor in logging in and out between missions and traveling between platforms, you can do 4 to 5 missions per hour, maybe 6 if you're very lucky. If you include call to arms, you'll earn 110 to 137.5k per hour from Repel Raid, 180k per hour from Repel multiple raids, and 192 to 240k per hour from Ninetales bounties. I find the smaller the ship, the better, because there's a lot of clutter and decorations on the ground, and smaller ships are better at getting in between that clutter. In that regard, the Aurora is the best ship for these missions. Not only because it's the smallest ship with a bed in the game, but the turrets are located on the nose, which makes it easier to aim. The Avenger Titan is also a good choice for these missions. It is bigger, but has more inventory space for looting and a nose turret for easier aiming. It's also available to rent for cheap. I imagine the Drake Cutter is better than the Titan for this, but I don't have access to it. Pro tip, and this works really well for the Aurora, is to land your ship at the entrance of the ground floor and use gimbal aiming to aim the turrets independently of the ship, and you'll have a nice shooting gallery. An interesting strategy that I haven't tried is to use the Constellation. The Constellation Andromeda comes with a P-52, which is even smaller than the Aurora, so you can use the P-52 for the missions, and when you're done, store it and bedlog in the Constellation. If you want to power level your security rep, I recommend the missions that you can do the fastest, because Repel Raid and Repel Multiple Raids give the same amount of rep progression, even though the payouts are different. Although once you reach level 3, I find Ninetales bounties are more worthwhile. There are orange containers scattered around the platforms, and they're leftovers from the Siege of Orison event. They stored medical supplies, weapons, mods, and ammo, an initiate friend or foe inverter, or an iffy, or they were empty. The number pads on these containers still work, and the way to obtain the code was to kill a Ninetales lieutenant during the event. But because there's no event, I don't know how to get a code to unlock these containers. Perhaps the higher security level missions may have a way. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. As I said earlier, I plan on making videos on what the level 4 and 5 missions are, if there are any. But recent announcements from CIG have complicated those plans, so it'll take a bit longer for that video to come out. In the meantime, if you want to know what else has changed in 3.18, especially the changes CIG didn't tell you, I highly recommend you watch this video right here.